Good in Tanya. We're on page Yud Beis, Amud Aleph, which I guess would be 23. Oy achiyase tshuva gedoylo. 3, 6, 9. 9 lines. The top of Yud Beis would end in a line. Oy. Now, the conversation over the foreseeable past has been about the difference between klipas nega and what the Rebbe calls sh'ar klipas tmeyes v'royes lagamri, also known as gimel klipas atmeyes. What's the difference between klipas nega and sh'ar klipas atmeyes v'royes lagamri? The difference is that sh'ar klipas tmeyes v'royes lagamri have no beater. You can't elevate them. All you can do is destroy them. The only way you can fix them is destroy them. And if a Yid partakes of them, which means a Yid engages in something which is doing Aveda, and you'll see at the beginning of the next Pedic, even if he doesn't know it's an Aveda, and even if he's doing it L'Shem Shamayim, it has no aliyah. You cannot elevate Sholosh Klipas Atmeyes Lagamri. Impossible. Can't be. Masha'enkin Klipas Nega is Kavanah. If you have no particular kavanah, it remains klipas nega. If you have a kavanah of kedusha, it's going over to the madregas of kedusha. If you have a kavanah which is not good, it's yedid lefi shah in rag gomor shashol shkuvis atmeyes lagamri, but it can be very easily retrieved. And the form that the Alter Rebbe used to present this difference is the word iser and heter. That sholosh shkuvis atmeyes lagamri is called iser. Iser is from the word tied down, shackled, locked up. And heter. Heter means untied, released. So klipas nega, even if it's eaten shalel Hashem shamayim and Hashem taiva, that is yedid levishon shalosh klipas atmeyes lagamri, it's never tied down and never ties you down. You can always turn it around. Masha'enkin shalosh klipas atmeyes. So when it comes to an aveda rachmana litzlan, the Rabbi says it has no aliyah till he doesn't love it. When Mashiach comes, then there's going to be elam haba. Then there will be an aliyah for shalosh. The Rabbi says there will be an aliyah for shalosh klipas atmeyes lagamri. Oy, there's another possibility. So 2 Sundays ago, last week I wasn't here. I was in Rostov. I was coming back from Rostov, yeah. But 2 weeks ago we learned Tanya last, and we learned the first. And the first was that it has no little Yossi loving, and now we're reading the second. Oy, Achiyah said tshuva b'dei l'kol kach. A person will do an incredibly great tshuva. That sins become like merits. Mamish. There's a concept of tshuva which is so great that can actually turn around the aveda and make it into a mitzvah. B'chlal we say a person engaged in shalosh klipas atmeyes lagamri is kosher v'aseh b'diach etzenim la'ilam and aliyah. But there is a possibility for a person to do an incredibly great tshuva. And because he does this incredibly high tshuva, the Aveda becomes a mitzvah, and then you have an aliyah even for shalosh klipas atmeyes lagamri. You know, in most places that you learn in the Rebbe's Torah, there's 2 madregas. There's deinis from the Gemara. There's deinis nas leikish gogas, which means that an Aveda you did it on purpose becomes like an Aveda you did by mistake. And then the second madrega is deinis nas leikish zochis, where the Aveda actually becomes a mitzvah. But the Rebbe has a sicha, Siyam Masechta Yuma, which I learned in Kippur, where the Rebbe says that there's really a third madrega. The first madrega is deinis nas leikish gogas, that the Aveda did on purpose becomes like a mistake. Second madrega is that the Aveda is erased, no longer exists. And the third madrega is that the Aveda becomes a mitzvah. And the Rebbe has a chiddush nifla in this sicha, where he speaks about the Aveda becomes the hechsher mitzvah. That we're doing the Aveda sets up. If you don't do the Aveda, you can't do tshuva. Doing the Aveda, it's a very long shesich. It's based on the Rogatchover, where the Aveda becomes a mitzvah. The Aveda is the hechsher mitzvah. It sets up the kiyama mitzvah. Anyway, okay, so the Alter Rebbe says there's a madrega of tshuva with deinis nas like yizachis, where the Aveda becomes like a merit. What is this? She tshuva meyava. When a person does tshuva out of love, but not stam as a love. In other words, I'm not doing tshuva out of fear. Right? The opposite of tshuva meyava is tshuva meyir. I do tshuva out of fear. What am I afraid of? I'm afraid of being punished. I'm afraid of this, that, and the other. Masha'enkin tshuva meyava means I'm doing tshuva because I love the Eibishter. Me'umka, the liba, from the depths of one's heart. The Yahava Rabbi with an infinite love. V'chasheka, and a longing. V'nefesh keika, and a thirsty soul. to be in a state of dveikis with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the person's neshama is thirsty to the Eibishter. Like a person who had found himself in a land that was exhausted and desolate, where there's no life. And when you find yourself in a terrible place, you want to get out. And if you do tshuva miyahava, with all of these components, these aspects in the Aveda Kabbalah, let's look at it again. How many words do you have here? Yeah, you have tshuva miyahava. Number 1, kadalima. Number 2, ahava rabba. Number 3, chasheka. Number 4, nefesh ekeka. Number 5, ledavka beyizbarach. And number 6, utzmeya nafshel Hashem kerseifa v'tziyah. So you have to analyze each one of these. This is not in our pay grade. This is not in our erech. But this is a person who did an Aveda, and the motivation for his tshuva is this incredible ahava to the Eibishter. It's not the fear of the Aveda. It's the ahava to the Eibishter that the Aveda holds him back from coming closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the person does tshuva with this much love to the Eibishter, so this dayness nasla kezochi, the Aveda becomes a mitzvah. Why? Because until this person did tshuva, so nafshe, his nefesh was be'eretz tzia v'tzalmoves, in a land of tzia, exhaustedness, desolation. Tzalmoves is tzeil moves, the shadow of death. He asiter achre, which is klipa orachei, kamerpnei adeshem, was far away from the face and the light and the face of the Eibishter. B'tachas, absolutely. Ulezeiz, and this distance, someone nafshe creates a thirst in his neshama. But yes, there's with even more power, mitzimoyin nefoshes hatzadik, than the thirst of the neshama of a tzaddik. Kimaimed Azal, it's written in the Gemara that b'mokem shebal tshuva aimed, where a place where Bal Tshuva stands, v'chulu. Right, there's 2 different gisses. Right, in the Gemara as we have it, it says b'mokem shebal tshuva aimed, in place where Bal Tshuva stands, aim tzadikim gemurim aimed b'sham. Perfect tzaddikim don't stand there. And by the way, if you look in the Gemara, you'll think there's actually 2 shittas. There are 2 opinions in the Gemara. Whether the tzaddik is higher than the Bal Tshuva is higher than the tzaddik. The Rambam paskins l'alocha l'maiseh, that the Bal Tshuva is higher than the tzaddik. But in the Gemara, as we have it, the expression is b'makom shebal tshuva ein, the place where Bal Tshuva stands, ain't tzaddikim gemurim v'cheidim lamed eindim sham. Perfect tzaddikim don't stand there. But the Rambam has a different gears. That b'makom shebal tshuva ein, in a place where Bal Tshuva stands, ain't tzaddikim gemurim v'cheidim lamed. Yes, that one word. Not they don't stand. They can't. There's not even a yochaylas. There's no possibility for a Bal Tshuva to stand in the place of a tzaddik. Because the urgency, the tzaddik to stand in the place of the Bal Tshuva. Because the urgency that the Bal Tshuva has, the tzaddik simply does not know. Farbas, Bal Tshuva me'avarabazun. One does tshuva this way, that is this infinite. Amru, this is what the Gemara says. Shesdeinis nasalek izachis. This causes the Aveda to become a mitzvah. Not the Aveda becomes a shegeg, not the Aveda becomes bottle, but the Aveda becomes a mitzvah. And he says why? Because of the Aveda. That's the key. Because of the Aveda. It comes to this love. If not for the Aveda, he wouldn't have this love. Okay, so this is the second inyan. The person does a chmon on an Aveda. So first, the Alter Rebbe says is, are these case? And the second Alter Rebbe says is, tshuva me'avarabba. Tshuva me'avarabba results in this dayness nasla gezochis, the Aveda becomes a mitzvah. So let's talk about this, right? So the last shiur I gave you was on the first one, on the first eifin, which is that the Ein Aliyah Ades Ketz. Today we're going to do the second one. This idea that the reason the Aveda becomes a mitzvah is because the Aveda brings the person to this Aveda. So you start with the Baal Shem Tov, which is actually quoted almost these words here in this Shtikel Tanya. It is the 10th kapitel Tilim Samach Gimel, right? Everybody knows it. Tzamalacha nafshi, kamalacha besari, be'eretz tzia v'oyev b'li moyim, which means my soul thirsts for you. My body aches for you. That's how we translate kama. Because I'm in a land of tzia v'oyev, a land of desolation and exhaustion. B'li moyim, where there is no mayim, mayim alatev. What's the next part? So, Kain ba'kedesh chazisicho. It's true. Kain means hain, yes. Ba'kedesh, when I was in Yerushalayim, when I was not hit, run away. David HaMelech had to run away because the Shaul wanted to kill him. He ended up by Achash Melech Gas, as the story is known. Melech Gas. And he was crying out that he was removed. He had to run away to save his life. So he says, Cain, it's true, but Kadesh, when I was in holiness, I saw you. David HaMelech says, Cain, but Kadesh, when I was in Yerushalayim, when I was next to the Beis HaMikdash, and the Oren HaKadosh, so, and now I'm far away. And then he finishes, right? I have this thirst, I have this ache, because I'm far away. When I was close, I was able to see, and now that I'm far, I'm wishing I could see here also. That's how you touch Cain, it's true. But Kadesh Chazisicha, that when I was in holiness, I was able to see. And I'm wishing that Lides Uskach Wadecha to see the Eisen cover, the Eivishter here in the Midbar Yehuda also. This is the simple touch. So the Baal Shem Tov changes one word. Everybody knows this famous teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. Then instead of the word Cain, the Baal Shem Tov says the word Halavai. Tzamalacha Nafshi, my soul thirsts for you. Kamalacha Vasadi, my body aches for you. Because I'm in a land of desolation and exhaustion, there's no life, no water. Halavai ba Kedesh Hadisah. Halavai, that when I was in holiness and I could see you, I was close to Eibishter, I would have the same urgency for a lakus like I have now. That's the one. Halavai, when I had a lakus, I would have a lakus as much as I have a lakus now in not having a lakus. Now, how do you have a lakus in not having a lakus? And of course, the answer b'kitzei nimritz is at us. By the famous Teres of Baal Shem Tov, b'makom shenetzeni shalom, b'chata shalom, shamu nimtza. So David HaMelech says, the way I want now is more than I ever had. So my wanting him in a condition where I don't have him is more than the have that I ever had when I was b'kedesh chazisich. This is the way. This is Baal Shem Tov's touch. Albeit, and the pshat is again. This says in Chassidus that there's a klal in Chassidus. Ultimately, it's back goes to Rav Gemara, but it's brought in Chassidus. And the klal in Chassidus is lav kedem lehed. The klal in Chassidus is lav kedem lehed. It's a psychological law. No is stronger than yes. No, a negative motivation is always going to be stronger than a positive motivation. Why? Because when the Eibishter created the world, the first thing he did was no and then yes. First there was darkness and then there was light. As they stated in the Gemara. Before, of course, the Eibishter made the world. First he made darkness, then he made light. Therefore, in the reality, a negative energy is stronger than a positive energy because the negative energy came first. Which means two people are running. One is running to treasure and one is running from danger. So Torah establishes, you want to say something? Torah establishes as an absolute law that the one running from danger is running harder than the one running towards good. You cannot possibly run to good with the same kind of urgency as you run away from danger. It is not shaykh that a positive thrust, you're running towards good, it can't possibly be equal to running away from that. It's ken nid zayin. It's simply not, can't be. It's impossible. So one person is running towards good, the other person is running away from negative. So it's a klal gadol. Negative is stronger than positive. So the Alter Rebbe posits, he proposes. A Yid didn't have Aveda. And he's running away from the Aveda. He's not running away from the Aveda because he's afraid. He's running away from the Aveda because he wants the Eibishter. But his want for the Eibishter is not based on his appreciation for the Eibishter. If he's running away from the Aveda because he's afraid of the Oynish, if he's running away from the Aveda because he has some kind of other fear, that's a very subjective thing. For lack of words, it's a selfish thing. But when a person loves Hashem, but he loves Hashem so much, and because of his love for the Eibishter, he's running away from, because his love for the Eibishter, he's trying to run away from, he loves the Eibishter. But in his running towards the Eibishter, because he loves the Eibishter, there can be two motivations. Number one, I love the Eibishter and I'm running towards the Eibishter because the Eibishter is good. Right? What does the Alter Rebbe say? Tam uru ki teva avaya, versucht vetirzen, that the Eibishter is good. Taste, and you'll see that the Eibishter is good. Tam uru ki teva avaya, a Yid runs to Lakus, because the Lakus is a good Zach. The Hillel Parasha used to say that if the Balei Taiva knew the Geshmak that there was in Limud Achsidus, they would abandon all their Taivas and dedicate themselves exclusively to Limud Achsidus, because there's no greater Geshmak than Limud Achsidus. A Yid runs to Lakus because he desires a Lakus. And this is a tzaddik. A tzaddik who loves Hashem and he's running to Eibishter from a Maisa, but the Ichid the Masme. This is Stam Maisa. But it's not Stam Maisa. Ichid the Masme is a Fabrenk. Which Masme was a Meshuggah Oivid. He was a tzaddik. Ich meine, that's about it. And he used to Fabrenk. So I told this to you once before. Rabbi Fuchs told me, after drinking mashka via fish. Rabbi Fuchs told me, he knew him from Atvat. He drank mashka like a fish. The Rebbe said once in a Fabrengen with a chuckle, to feel at the niggadar. He didn't eat too much. It's a Maisa listed. The tenets is the under Asogis, you know. Rabbi Fuchs's, he drunk a mashka via fish, is the Rebbe's to feel at the niggadar. You understand? It's points of view, from which angle you're coming. There's a place called Timna. You can go Oile Timnasa and Yoyle Timnasa. Depends where you are. So to one person is, you drunk a mashka via fish, and to the second is to feel at the niggadar. But anyway, he was Fabrengi with Chassidim. He was a Moedik Oivid. There was no such thing as a moment or an instant or a Kudah which was not a Vedas Hashem. And he was being taken home from the Fabrengi. Who took him home? Rabbi Chaikel Chanan. Allah Hashem. And they're walking in the streets of Rosh. I don't know which city it is. And Abitcha was shikir. And Abitcha is talking to himself. And he's saying to himself, Ich hab him lieb. Again and again, Ich hab him lieb. I love him. So finally, Reb Chaikel Chanan, Allah Shalom, says to him, Vemen has to leave. He says, what says the Meibish? Who do you love? He says, what do you mean who I love? I love God. Vemen has to believe the Meibish. This was the Bishop the Masman said. This is the Av of a Tzaddik. Of Baal Tshuva's has an Av. He wants the Eibishter. But the Baal Tshuva's want for the Eibishter is not because the Eibishter is good, but because where he is so bad. When you inspire within yourself a desire for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you realize that the place that you're in is the opposite for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so it's taka ahava, it's love, but it's what's called in Chassidus ahava b'takbeides. That's how ahava that comes from Eish, from Gevura, not an ahava that comes from Mayim and Chesed. It's not I love the Eibishter, and therefore I'm running to the Eibishter, I love the Eibishter, and something is holding me back, which creates a negative drive. So it says in Gemara, and like I said, the Shenish thing about Brot Chassidus Samach Vav, no is stronger than yes. Lav Kedem. This is why a Baal Tshuva is higher than a Tzaddik. Because the Tzaddik is running to the Eibishter, the Baal Tshuva is also running to the Eibishter, but the Baal Tshuva is motivated not by how good the Eibishter is, but how terrible the place he finds himself in. And Chassidus says you should know that if one person is running to Lakus because Lakus is good, and the other person is running to Lakus because he wants a Lakus and Klip is holding him back, it's not possible. It's not possible that the tzaddik running towards good should be equal to the Baal Tshuva's running towards good, because the Baal Tshuva is not running towards good. The Baal Tshuva is running away from Ra and Lav Kedem Lein. So the Alter Rebbe says that he didn't Aveda. And the Aveda is an obstacle in his relationship with the Eibishter. And he wants his relationship with the Eibishter. And he fights and he tears himself away. He rips himself away from the hold, from the Avenesechem Avdila Benechem and Alekechem, the klipa that holds him back, right? What did we call it before? Kosher v'aser b'diachasem. The klipa holds him, the klipa ties him down, the klipa knots him, locks him up, and doesn't let him come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if he successfully rips that knot, if he successfully rips that constraint, that resistance, that friction, and he runs to the Eibishter, so now he has a compounded Ratzon. He's running to Hashem, but he's not running to Hashem because the Eibishter is good. He's running to Hashem because what he is bad. So when he finally tears away from the hold that Klippa has on him, so there's a multiple. You have to multiply his thrust plus the resistance. That's how it works. If you're trying to go someplace, and someone holds you back, and when you finally tear away, you're going to be moving faster than if you ran by yourself. Because you have to compound how much energy you were investing, and you thrust forward times the resistance of that other person. That's when you go much faster, much farther, and much harder. And this is why the Baal Tshuva stands higher than a tzaddik. And this is the pshat that Avein is Avein becomes a mitzvah. Why? So the Rebbe says there's another eitz. He does an Avein. If you do tshuva me'avarab, which means you have tshuva not because of a oynish, because you want to be connected to Hashem, which means ahava. L'davka be'yizma. and the klipa holds you back. That's the problem with Aveda. Aveda is not just an instant. Aveda lasts a second. And for that second, it's called the Merida. But then the Aveda is gone. But the Aveda lingers. It's a wall. It's an obstacle. It's a desensitization. It takes away a chush from you running to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You have to break it. When you successfully break the hold that klipa has on you, and you run towards the Eibishter, that running is better because of the Aveda. If there hadn't been the Aveda, you couldn't run that fast. So the Alter Rebbe says inside, the Hoyel Vayedei Zeh, because of this Aveda, you come to this Ahava, because this Aveda brings you to this Ahava, so the Aveda is the source of the Ahava. The Aveda is the source of the Ahava. No, if the Aveda is the source of the Ahava, the Aveda becomes part of a mitzvah. And like I told you, the Rebbe says in a Sikh in Chelek Yud Zayin, it's a Sikh that touches Pachas Achrei. This week's Chitas, Bashgacha Pratis, the Shabbos before Pesach, we're learning about Yom Kippur. Right? As I come to this week is Chitas is Yom Kippur, and we're going to do it 3 times in a row. Because the first day Pesach is Shabbos, the last day Pesach is Shabbos. So we're going to be doing Yom Kippur 3 times. Yom Kippur this week, Yom Kippur next week, and Yom Kippur the Shabbos after Pesach. And the Rebbe has the Sikh in Chelek Yud Zayin, it's Yom Kippur Tekesicha, where he speaks about this idea of Zdenis Nasla Kizochis, and he says the Aveda is called Hechsher Mitzvah. The Rebbe is a very scholarly Sikh, where he talks about a thing which prepares you for a mitzvah. And the Rebbe brings Fashidim and Madregas. He says there's no Madrega more than this one, because the Aveda itself is mamish, the Yesod v'Shayrish of the Tshuva. The Aveda is the Yesod of the Tshuva. So the Alter Rebbe says here, this is the second mitzvah. And I'm going to start from the beginning again and sort of give you the summary. The Alter Rebbe says there's 2 in Yonah. There's Heter and there's Isser. Heter means klipa, but it's not tied down. So when it comes to Heter, Kavona makes a difference. It either goes up or it goes down or it stays where it is. And even if it goes down, it can be brought back to neutral. And then there's Isser. Isser means tied down, shackled. Eingespannt. Which means, Chas v'shalom, a person doesn't have Aveda, he's stuck forever. And the Alter Rebbe says the Aveda also gets fixed in one of 2 ways. The first way it gets fixed is the Yossi Lavi, that was last time. And the second way it gets fixed is Tshuva B'Yavad Rabba. When the person does Tshuva B'Yavad Rabba, so that the Aveda is the source of the Yavad Rabba. The running to Hashem with such an urgency is only because of the Aveda. And because the running to Hashem with such an urgency is because of the Aveda is a part of the Tshuva itself, it's a part of the mitzvah itself. Okay? Questions or comments? So I'm going to say one more thing, and then we're going to stop, and then we'll do the Rebbe's Pedic, Rebbe's Kapitel. And I want to say it now. Today we're going to have a good sheet. Every day, this is my 4th class in the Kapitel, but today's sheet is, in a way, a yesod for the whole Pedic. I probably say it every day, but I think this time I mean it. This is the word, okay? We know that there's something called Tshuva Tato and there's something called Tshuva Law. Tshuva Tato is the lower Tshuva and Tshuva Law is the higher Tshuva. Here we have something, it's not called Tshuva Law, it's called Tshuva Meyavad Rabba. And the shaila is Tshuva Meyavad Rabba and Tshuva Law the same thing? And somebody asked me the question 2 weeks ago. Is it the same thing? Now, the problem that I have is, first of all, the simple answer to the question is no, they're not the same. Tshuva Meyavad Rabba is just a very, very high madreg of Tshuva Tato. As I'll explain to you in a moment. Tshuva Meyavad Rabba, the Tshuva we're describing, is an extreme Tshuva Tato. It's not a Tshuva. The problem is that in Hasidus, when they talk about Tshuva Tato and Tshuva Law, they say exactly this. That Tshuva Tato is Denis Nas like Ishgogas. The lower Tshuva makes the Aveda done on purpose into an accident, into a shegi. And the Tshuva Ilah is Denis Nas like Izochis, makes the Aveda into a mitzvah. But I believe, I don't know for sure, I believe they're not the same. And I want to tell you how. This is a good conversation. It's good to know this. It's good to verstehen. What's the difference in Tshuva Tato and Tshuva Law in a sentence? Tshuva Tato has to do with Avedas. And Tshuva Law has to do with the Eibishter. I'm going to say it one more time. Tshuva Tato has to do with Avedas. And Tshuva Law has to do with the Eibishter. Or in Kabbalistic language, Tshuva Tato is Vav K. right? To bring the K back to its place and to bring the K back to the vault. There's two madrigas in Tshuva Tato. And Tshuva Lo is Yud K, to bring the K back to its place and then to connect the K to the Yud. The difference is, Tshuva Tato means I didn't Aveda, and the Aveda is not good. And I'm doing Tshuva to get rid of the Aveda. I'm going away from sin. And as I mentioned to you before, going away from sin means that in addition to the idea that L'Yosha Veid L'Kis, now the person doesn't have Aveda. I'll read the Tanya Perek Avdal, chapter 24 in Tanya. The Rabbi says, an Aveda is Merida Bevelach Mach Amoch HaMakadosh Baruch Hu. An Aveda is a rebellion. The moment of the Aveda is a rebellion is made. But the reason you're doing Tshuva is because the Tshuva, an Aveda, is like a wall. Right? In psychological terms, every time you do an Aveda, you care less about it. Until you reach a point which is called Plikasol. You just have no sensitivity to it at all. You're just immune to it. So the Klipa holds you. And it interferes with your progress in your relationship with the Eibishter. So Tshuva Tato means I want to get away from this. The Avoin, the sin, which is holding me back, which has me dizzy, which has me fogged. In the heaviness of the Aveda, which interferes with my Aveda Hashem going forward. The minute after you do the Aveda, not the minute of the Aveda. Tshuva Tato is to cleanse. You go away from the Aveda, you do Tshuva. Right? And of course, the Rabbi says in Tanya, Tshuva basically is Aziva Sachet Bovad, that I won't do it anymore. But there's a shleimus of Tshuva Tato where you rid yourself of the Aveda. In other words, I'm focusing on my sin and the effect, the long-term effect that the sin has. And Tshuva is to cleanse. It's called Tshuva Tato. So the Chazal say, the Gemara says, Tshuva Tato is Deinis Nas like a Gogas and Aveda which did on purpose. Which is a big scar, becomes Aveda mistake. Tshuva Ilah has nothing to do with sin. Tshuva Ilah is not about Avedas. Tshuva Ilah is Varuach Toshav Alolakim Hashem Nistanim. Tshuva Ilah means I should be Keket HaKadosh Baruch. Because there's a logical presumption. There's a commonsensical assumption. The presumption is that if I'm thinking about Hashem, focused and locked in, I'm not going to have. If I'm thinking about the Eibush, if I'm busy with Hashem, if I'm involved with Hashem, I'm engaged with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm not going to do anything wrong. It's common sense. Huh? You right? Everyone understands that, yeah? If I'm involved with Eibush. So if I was able to do an Aveda, that means that a minute before I do the Aveda, I stop paying attention to the Eibush. So every Aveda is two Avedas. The first Aveda is that I'm not focusing on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the second Aveda is because I stopped focusing on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so b'meila I was able to fall into this negative action. So that's to be two Tshuvas. Tshuva Tato means I have to correct the Aveda that I did, and Tshuva Ilah I have to correct what made it possible for the Aveda to happen. In the first place, which was my lack of focus on Elokus. It's called Tshuva Ilah, the higher Tshuva, to return to the Meibish, to be re-involved in the Meibish. And as you know, that in Chazal, and it's explained in Tanya, there's a lot of Hasidus on it. This is called a Korban Eilah. A Korban Chatos is correcting the sin, going away from the Aveda. And a Korban Eilah is Pashat reconnecting to Hashem. So there were certain Avedas. First, there was no Chatas at all. You couldn't bring a sin offering. You couldn't bring a Korban to correct the sin, but you would bring a Korban Eilah to reconnect to HaKadosh Baruch. And then, even those Avedas, for which there was a Korban Chatas, which corresponds to Tshuva Tato, to correct the Aveda, you would then bring an Oila afterwards. So you did a Tshuva, going away from the Aveda, and this is the Korban Chatas. And then you did another Tshuva to reconnect yourself to the Meibishter. This was the Korban Eilah that came after. This is called Tshuva Tato and Tshuva Ilah. Rabbi said, understand that Tshuva Ilah has nothing to do with sin. Nothing to do with sin, right? What are we discussing here? Something which is called Tshuva Me'av Rabba that has everything to do with sin. The Tshuva Me'av Rabba, which is being described here, is exactly the opposite of Tshuva Ilah. Tshuva Ilah means I'm involved in maybe I forgot about my Avedas. It's just me and Hashem. Tshuva Me'av Rabba means I have an Aveda, and the Aveda is a war between me and the truth. And the Aveda motivates the Aveda motivates the thrust in the direction of Elokus. So the Aveda is so much a part of the Tshuva. So when the question is asked, and it comes up every time you learn this, is Tshuva Me'av Rabba described here the same thing as Tshuva Ilah? The answer to Pashtus is absolutely not. Tshuva Me'av Rabba described here is the highest madrega of Tshuva Tato. Because Tshuva Tato means I'm going away from sin. But if going away from sin, there's different motivations. There's Tshuva Tato from Yireh, from fear. This is tshuva tata. Me'ahava. It's a lower truth from love, but in love there's madregas. This particular madregas tshuva me'ahava rav unkadaliba b'chasheka v'nefeshekeka l'dafka be'yizbarich ki'adheina ha'ised nafshe dark be'edet tziv etzamoves, and he wants to climb out of it. So the bepashnis, the tshuva me'ahava rav is being described here is a tshuva tata, not a tshuva law. What's the problem? The problem is that you always learn in Chassidus that tshuva law is deinis nasa gezachis. In other words, you have two different ideas. They're very different. And both of them have the same effect. Deinis nasa gezachis means the Aveda becomes a mitzvah. Deinis nasa gezachis means the Aveda becomes a mitzvah. Here, the Aveda becomes a mitzvah because my tshuva is running away from the Aveda with such an urgency that I'm better than a tzaddik. There, the Aveda becomes a mitzvah because I'm not even thinking about the Aveda. I'm thinking about Hashem. The Aveda I got rid of in the tshuva tata. When you're thinking about the Eibishter, the Zodeh, which became a shegeg through the tshuva me'ira, through the tshuva tata, becomes a mitzvah tshuva law, and I don't know the answer. In other words, to me, these are two different, very different ideas, that both have the effect of Zdeinis Nas Leke Zochas Avedis becoming mitzvahs, but they're opposites min hakotzer lakotzer. Here, the Aveda becomes a mitzvah because of the Aveda. The Aveda motivates this Ahava, which is such a drive and such a thrust, because of the principle of Lav Kedem Lahein, that the person does such a tshuva that the Aveda becomes a mitzvah because the tshuva came from the Aveda. Over there, you say you're not thinking about Avedis B'chlal, you're thinking only about the Meibishter, just about Hashem. But you first did tshuva tata. You did the lower tshuva. And after you did the lower tshuva, you're trying to return to the Eibishter's graces. It's called the Korban Elah, a Deireh, which is after the Kraklit. Hashem should love you like not he should forgive you for your Aveda, but he should love you like as if you never sinned. It's a very different concept than Zdeinis Nas Leke Zochis. And I think it's a tzarachi, and I'm sure it's not a contradiction. But they're very different ideas. The Zdeinis Nas Leke Zochis that we have here is quite different from the Zdeinis Nas Leke Zochis which we normally have. Right, and by the way, the Rebbe teaches us that we should go to Chakilah Tshuva. The Rebbe teaches us Tshuva. Why? All kinds of reasons. But the Nekuda is that in our generation we need to have a positive Tshuva. I was traveling. I was in California for the weekend. So when I travel, I have moments where of reading. And usually I'm reading because I'm so tired, I need to sleep. When I'm so tired that I cannot sleep, so I'm reading. So I picked up a book, and by the way, they're good svarim. I don't know. They're good svarim. The material is good. I just feel on every page that I'm reading Neil Balashim. Always get puts. It's missing the rawness of the original writings of Chassidim. But it's called Yechidus. Fachabad magazine gave out 2 krochim from Adov Halpern Zayn Gesund, which is called Yechidus. And it's basically a book of people's individual accounts of their Yechidus by the Rebbe. Now, what did you just tell me? You have to do first Tshuva Tata and then Tshuva Elah. So the interview that I read last night when I couldn't fall asleep was from a Yid by the name of Rabbi Villiger. It was a big chassid named Mordechai Villiger. Mordechai Villiger was a chassid of the Minchas Allah, the Munkachim. But afterwards he was his own man. He was very close to the Rebbe. His son, who lived in Crown Heights, he was very close to the Rebbe. Rabbi Villiger was very close to the Rebbe, but he was a Kloisenberger, not Munkach, Kloisenberg. And he was the man in between Kloisenberg and Lubavitch. And he says beautiful stories. There's such beautiful stories how much the Rebbe cherished and appreciated the Kloisenberger Rebbe. There was a very big key of us. They never met face to face. The Kloisenberger never came to see the Rebbe. But he was always sending people to us, the Rebbe hates us. And the Rebbe cared about it. The Rebbe he told his Chassidim at the end of his life, I know the Rebbe thinks about me every day because I feel it. Because he had once a surgery. And this Binyamin Villiger waited 3 hours. The surgery finished at 4, and they called it 7:70 at 7. And he heard the Rebbe screaming at Chanukah from behind. The operation finishes at 4, and you can't tell me until now. I haven't stopped thinking about him for a moment. The Rebbe says, the operation finished at 4, and you're calling me now. I haven't stopped. The Rebbe said, he was upset. The Operation finish at 4. Yes, I haven't stopped thinking about the Kloiser Begin for a second. So one of the sweet stories you have in this Yechidus, and of course it's all partial, as much as it is Vifos is Vedic, as much as they print is more. And you say in a minute, I mean, this person, they have maybe 10 pages of Rabbi have 30 pages of interview, 50 pages of interview, is the following. That the Kloisenberger Rebbe was already sick, and given gesund, which meant that he was no longer speaking and he was no longer writing. I don't know if you remember, he passed away Friday, the same week as Gimel Tammuz. Gimel Tammuz was Sunday, Pashat Chukas. He passed away 5 days later, the same week, Vav Tammuz. Friday, Erev Shabbos Kedesh, Day Chukas Ateidah. Dog Gazeta said, I said Friday of the week of Pashat Chukas. You touched it out, that means this year it's 25 years. So he was ill, very ill. They used to come to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said some very interesting things to them. But at 1 o'clock in the morning, the phone rings in the Binyamin Bilder's house. 1 o'clock in the morning, it's Chadakov. And Chadakov asks him, are you the editor of this Kloisenberger newspaper that comes out? And the Rebbe tells him the name, and I forgot the name of this newspaper. So he woke him up. I mean, Chadakov woke him up. It's 1 o'clock in the morning, for heaven's sakes. And he wasn't happy about it. He says, no, I'm not the editor, but I know who is, and I can make a connection if you need. He says, the Rebbe told me to tell him that they published in the recent issue of this magazine, this Kloisenberger magazine, an old Sikha, an old Drosha that the Kloisenberger gave in the 60s, or the 50s. And it was very musadik. It was very gvuradik. So the Rebbe says the Maimed and Matzav Yetzman Kloisenberger Rebbe is that he cannot speak. So when you print an article from 30 or 40 or 50 years ago, he can't balance it out. The Rebbe said you have to tell the editor that they shouldn't print such articles because today Yidden need Idud and his chaskus. Yidden don't need to be smashed down. Yidden need to be picked up. So Benjamin Villiger, who doing this interview, said, my initial reaction was I was so upset. For this, you woke me up 1 o'clock in the morning. For this, he says the Rebbe is sitting in 770 at 1 o'clock in the morning, and he read this article in the Kloisenberger paper, and it bothered him enough to make the phone call. This is not a newspaper which is being sent out to Freie Yidden who are, Rachman al-Islam, an edge away from Shmad. And you're going to tell them off, they're going to say, you know what, forget you and forget the whole Abish and that's it. So they'll hear upon Relative Muslim. What's going to happen? And the Rebbe bothered Chadakov to call immediately and to say you can't do it. And he realized how much was negated of that. That's how the story is told in this book, Sefer HaYechid. I read it yesterday afternoon, Shabbos afternoon, late in the afternoon. So the Toichen HaDover is, the Rebbe said in our generation, we do Tshuva in law, our generation needs his chaskos yaseido and Eden, we do only positive. So we do tshuva. Tshuva means to connect to the Eibishter. And the Rebbe explains that to connect to the Eibishter, the Aveda goes away. But again, it's different than what's written here.